What if the very people tasked with keeping our country running smoothly were suddenly, brutally, and seemingly randomly purged from their jobs? I'm not talking about a dystopian novel, but what many are calling the federal employee red wedding. Was this a calculated move to shrink government, or a chaotic power grab that will cripple essential services? The numbers are staggering, the stories are shocking, and the potential consequences are terrifying. Buckle up, because we're diving deep into this mess. The first wave hit with the Deferred Resignation Program. 75,000 federal workers, about 3% of the workforce, took the deal, lured by the promise of severance. But even here, things went sideways. Some IRS employees who signed up were told they were too essential to leave during tax season. This is just the beginning of the story. This program is already being challenged, and more chaos is on the horizon. It's like offering a life raft, then snatching it away at the last second. What kind of morale does that create? This is a disaster. Then came the real bloodbath, the probationary employee purge. These are workers who've been on the job for a relatively short time, between 1 and 2 years, meaning they lack the civil service protections of their more senior colleagues. The layoffs cascaded through agencies like a tidal wave. 70 at the Office of Personnel Management, dozens at the Department of Education, over 1,000 at the Department of Veterans Affairs, 2,300 at the Interior Department. The numbers are insane. Each of those numbers have a name, a family, a mortgage to pay. This isn't just about statistics. These are real lives being shattered. And it gets worse. 3,400 at the U.S. Forest Service, just a month after deadly wildfires. Close to 3,600 at the FBI. These are the people protecting us, managing our resources, keeping us safe. How can these agencies possibly function effectively with such massive cuts? It's like defunding the fire department while the city's burning. It doesn't make any sense. It's an attack on the foundation of government. It's like burning the house down to roast a pig. The Department of Health and Human Services was especially hard hit, with up to 5,200 layoffs. The National Cancer Institute lost 330 employees. Cancer didn't suddenly become less of a threat. ARPH, the agency tasked with finding medical breakthroughs, practically gutted because almost all its workers were probationary. So, medical breakthroughs are no longer a priority? The Epidemic Intelligence Service at the CDC, the crown jewel of global public health, is going away, even with an avian flu epidemic raging. The cuts are not only deep, they're strategically insane. The chaos was amplified by sheer incompetence. Some layoff notices went to people who already took the deferred resignation offer. The EPA got their numbers wrong twice. The Small Business Administration fired workers, unfired them, then fired them again, and gave them an automated apartment building hotline to appeal their terminations. It's like the Keystone Cops are running the government. You couldn't make this stuff up. It's beyond parody. The Energy Department fired 300 probationary employees at the agency that manages the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. Then, surprise, surprise, they realized that maybe, just maybe, managing nuclear weapons is kind of important and desperately try to get those workers back. Apparently, the Energy Department didn't even know that particular agency had anything to do with building nuclear weapons. This is not just incompetence. It's a dereliction of duty. How can we trust these people to keep us safe when they don't even know what their own agencies do? OPM claims these were all low performers, but many who received notices had never received a negative performance report. And probationary applied to longtime workers who simply switched jobs, which could be illegal. The reality is that the government is trying to cut corners and is being reckless. What is happening is the government is using any excuse to cut people, even though they are not low performers. This probationary worker purge was just a prelude to a much larger plan, outlined in an executive order that essentially gave Elon Musk, with his Doge project, full power to hire and fire. The target is 30 to 40% budget cuts across government, mostly from personnel, for every worker hired, for will have to be fired. Some agencies are scrambling to slow the pace because too many key people are already gone. This is a scorched earth policy, dismantling the government piece by piece. This is separate from the attempt to cancel entire agencies, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There, firings hit both probationary and term employees. The Trump administration has been ordered to stop terminating CFPB employees unless it is for cause. And all of this doesn't even touch the widespread political firings of agency leaders at the FBI, the CDC, the Federal Elections Commission, the National Labor Relations Board, and many more. The list is endless. It's a wholesale dismantling of checks and balances. The alleged rationale is to shrink the size and scope of government, but culling the workforce won't do that. Eliminating half of all federal employee jobs would only reduce the federal budget by about 2%. The only thing these cuts reduce is government efficiency. Helplines will go unanswered, businesses will go uninspected, scientific advancements will go unmade. And, in all likelihood, contractors will get hired at a greater cost to the government. The numbers don't add up. This isn't about fiscal responsibility. It's about something else entirely. Is it a reordering of government priorities? Not at all. The orders have been haphazard, not targeted at any alleged fat in the bureaucracy. It depends on who has the fewest civil service protections and who takes a fake buyout offer. You're going to trim deeply in one place and not in another, with no coherence. It's like playing darts blindfolded and hoping to hit the bullseye. There's no strategy, no logic, just random destruction. Is it revenge? Not against these workers, but this is closer to the truth. It's about control. Trump and Musk desire to control the bureaucracy, to force it into submission and loyalty. The political firings are a warning to those who remain. Step out of line, and you're next. It's a reign of terror, a demand for absolute fealty to the king. This is not about public service. It's about personal power. The Inspector General of the U.S. Agency for International Development put out a report critical of pauses on foreign aid, and he was fired the next day. FEMA approved scheduled payments for migrant shelter in New York City, and he and 3 subordinates were immediately sacked. There's even a DI watch list with names and personal information of mostly black federal health workers, potentially targeted for firing and harassment. This is not just about policy differences. It's about silencing dissent and punishing those who dare to challenge the regime. The government's output over the next 4 years will be abysmal. Government is routinely criticized for being too deliberate, too outmanned, too inattentive. Now it's going to be more outmanned and more inattentive, and the things it will do quickly will be frequently wrong and reversed after the damage is done. Workers will be demoralized and angry, unmotivated and paralyzed in the face of crisis for fear of getting noticed. This is a recipe for disaster. Some private sector businesses move fast, break things, and rule by fear. When they screw up, their websites crash for a few days. When government screws up, people die. The stakes are infinitely higher. You can't run a country like a failing startup. One federal worker who recently left the government said that the efforts underway are going to be catastrophic to our very way of life as U.S. citizens. They hope that when the dust settles, whoever is left can pick up the pieces and rebuild. But they won't be around to see it. This is a stark warning from someone who witnessed the destruction firsthand. If these mass layoffs commence, one inescapable consequence will be a rise in the number of unemployed Americans. And the Trump administration might just try to squelch that bad news by crippling the agency that measures unemployment, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This isn't just about cutting costs. It's about controlling the narrative. If you can't measure unemployment accurately, you can pretend it doesn't exist. Republicans have a history of opposing the BLS for its objective reports on the state of the economy. In 1971, President Nixon requested and received a list of the Jews then employed at BLS, as he was nervous about the unemployment levels the Bureau was reporting. Since empiricism is the ism that most seems to vex Trump and right-wing media, such counting agencies as BLS have to be viewed as prime offenders. This is a pattern of behavior, a deliberate effort to undermine objective truth. The way to reduce the deficit begins with taxing the rich and cutting the Pentagon's budget. Instead, they're going after some of the smallest agencies in the government, not in search of redundant employees, but of projects that stand athwart the kind of rigged economies through which they've prospered. It's not about fiscal responsibility. It's about protecting their own interests. The Marquis of Queensberry rules were devised in 1867 to define sportsmanlike conduct in the boxing ring. Donald Trump does not follow them. He fights more like a common thug, with no holds barred. Unfortunately, many liberals, thinking that this is still a normal democracy, follow the high-minded Marquis. You are kind of damned either way. Get down into the slime pit with Trump, or play fair and get hit below the belt. This is the fundamental challenge we face. How do you fight someone who doesn't play by the rules? On February 8th, a judge temporarily enjoined Elon Musk from accessing sensitive Treasury Department systems. But on February 11th, another judge modified that order to allow high-level Treasury colleagues to have full access. Perish the thought that those colleagues might be in cahoots with Musk. And a judge allowed Trump to proceed with his deferred resignation program, even though it's not clear whether the government even has the legal authority to make good on the promised severance payments. These decisions raise serious questions about the independence and judgment of the judiciary. Robert Frost once defined a liberal as the fellow who is so high-minded that he won't take his own side in an argument. If even Democrat-appointed judges are going to look for ways to split hairs to seem ultra-fair and balanced, in the face of a wholesale assault on the Constitution, American democracy is toast. We need judges who are willing to stand up for the rule of law, even when it's unpopular. Thankfully, most judges haven't fallen into this trap. Judge Amir Ali issued a forceful ruling ordering the Trump administration to restore funding for all USAID contractors. He barred Trump officials from implementing any contract cancellations or stop work orders while further litigation plays out. This is a glimmer of hope in a dark situation. Chief Justice John Roberts warned explicitly against threats to ignore court orders as a fundamental attack on the judiciary. He recounted the sordid history of defiance of court orders and added that judicial independence is undermined unless the other branches are firm in their responsibility to enforce the court's decrees. Let's see if Roberts is as good as his word. The Queensberry rules only work if both sides honor them. The future of our democracy may depend on it. They're booing us in Canada, which is not an unintended side effect of Donald Trump's statecraft, but rather its goal. Over the weekend, when NBA and NHL games were played in Canada between Canadian and US-based teams, the performance of our national anthem was met with a chorus of boos. This is a symptom of a much deeper problem: the erosion of America's standing in the world. Canadians understood that the ostensible reason for Trump's threat of a tariff on Canadian goods, stopping the flow of fentanyl, was absurd. Canadians understood that the real reason Trump was threatening tariffs was that he wanted to assert his, and secondarily, America's, dominance over a nation he thought needed to be disabused of any notions it may have entertained of enjoying some kind of partnership with the U.S. and with him. It's about power, not partnership. Of the many wrenching changes Trump is inflicting on our nation, certainly one of the most fundamental is our position in the world. The very notion of our having allies, of nations that believe they're in some way aligned with us because we're both liberal democracies that sometimes help each other out, is rapidly being superseded by a hierarchy of power. There are the adversaries we strive to best, China and Russia, chiefly, but when it comes to nations that have been on our side, with which we have long-standing alliances, well, we strive to best them too. Alliances link nations horizontally. Trump's view of international relations is vertical. This is a fundamental shift in how America sees the world and how the world sees America. So, is government incompetence inevitable? Is this red wedding a sign of things to come? Or is there still hope for rebuilding and restoring faith in our institutions? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of the issues that matter. This fight is far from over. We need to stay informed, stay engaged, and hold those in power accountable.